lovely people, welcome back to my channel. To those of you who are new to my channel, I am Rux, and this is a place where we discuss all things astrology related. So today we are going to be talking about a topic that I've got a great deal of interest in, and I've found it to be particularly significant when it does happen in people's natal charts. So to do a quick recap, the natal chart is the cornerstone of astrology. The natal chart is based on the time, place, and date of birth of the individual, and it's a coded map of the sky at the exact time when we were born. Now, in Western astrology, we work with 10 planets in the natal chart, but the two most important planets, and I'd say if there's one thing that you can look at in someone's natal chart, and if you want to get some really broad stroke cues about who they are, what they care about, what motivates them, what holds them back, what challenges they are facing, I would say look at the sun and the moon. So the luminaries, the sun and the moon, are especially important in someone's natal chart, and we all have them in the natal chart somewhere, because they talk about the conscious, which is the sun, versus the unconscious. They talk about the future, again associated with the sun, versus the past associated with the moon. The luminaries, the sun and the moon, are also associated with the child's parents and the way the child perceived the parental relationship. Usually the sun is associated with the father figure and the moon is associated with the mother figure. And last but not least, the sun is the symbol of the ego and the symbol of the hero journey in this lifetime, whereas the moon is associated with our subconscious wants, our subconscious needs, our internal harmony, our emotional reactions, our default modes and patterns, our intrinsic personality, so characteristics of our personality and of our psyche that we are not necessarily aware of, but that form the basis of who we are on a day-to-day basis. So today we're going to discuss about aspects in the natal chart between these two planets, between the luminaries. Now, I want to clarify from the very beginning that it is not mandatory that you have any aspect between these two planets. I, for instance, don't have any aspect between these two planets in my chart. But for people who do have any sort of aspect between the sun and the moon, do continue to listen ahead. Now, I also want to flag that we're going to be talking about the main aspects. We're going to be talking about the conjunction, the opposition, the square, the trine, and the sextile. So if you want to find out if you've got any sort of aspects between your sun and moon in your natal chart, I recommend going to one of the online free chart generators to see what your chart looks like, and to just put in your date, time, and place of birth, and voila, you should also have a table of aspects. If you are unsure whether you've got any aspects between these two planets, you can always get in touch with me, because I do offer natal chart readings, audio recorded natal chart readings, which talk about everything in your natal chart, not just the sun and the moon, but we can obviously discuss about the relationship between the sun and the moon and how that plays out into your life. So let's start off by talking about the conjunction between the sun and the moon in someone's natal chart. Now, the way that can manifest is, and if the sun and the moon are in conjunction, it usually means that you are a new moon baby. Well, not usually, it always means that you are a new moon baby. And symbolically, the new moon is associated with the beginning, with the inception of something, with the start of something. It's also associated with leadership, with cardinality, with opening up new paths. So usually new moon people, so those who have a conjunction between the sun and the moon, are people who start off something, who do very well as trailblazers, who are at the beginning when something significant happens. They can become very restless and search for new beginnings throughout their lives and feel like intrinsically like they are meant to be these pioneers in whatever field they choose to operate in. It is also, I would say, the conjunction between the sun and the moon is, I would consider it an easy aspect, even though the conjunction sometimes can be quite problematic and challenging. I would consider it an easy aspect because there seems to be an alignment between the ego and the subconscious. There seems to be an alignment between what a person wants, so what the ego is telling them to want, to look for in this lifetime, and what a person needs in order to feel fulfilled on the inside. Usually people who have the conjunction between the sun and the moon in their chart are very decisive, they're very motivated, and there's like a single pointedness aspect about this. They are very focused on one particular topic, on one particular outcome, on one particular objective. That's why they're usually very, very determined people. They can also come across as a bit insular and insensitive to other people's needs, because there is such a strong focus on the individual itself that they can become, without them intending to, they can become quite unresponsive or unable to pick up the cues from people around them, whatever it is that they do. They simply don't notice others, or they don't notice other people's needs because they're so focused on themselves as an individual. I would also say this having a sun-moon conjunction in your chart might have manifested in a person's childhood as an alignment between the mother and the father, who might have built like a common front, and their attitude towards the child was very similar. The messages that the child got from them was very similar. There was one voice of authority, or at least that's what the child might have perceived. Now, what happens if you actually have an opposition between the sun and the moon? It usually means that you were born at a full moon, and full moon people tend to be quite the opposite of new moon people, of those who have a conjunction between the sun and the moon in their chart. So whilst those with the conjunction can be quite insensitive to other people's needs and can be quite insensitive to cues from the environment, people with the opposition between the sun and the moon are incredibly sensitive to other people's needs. They are incredibly fast to pick up cues from the outside environment. They can also feel quite conflicted internally, I would say, and not know which way to go. There can be like a strong contrast between, on the one hand, what they would like to pursue and what they feel like they should be pursuing, and on the other hand, what they intrinsically feel like they are meant to be doing, what they intrinsically feel good at, and what their subconscious is telling them. So there can be quite the rupture between the conscious and the subconscious. This can result in an individual seeking external validation quite a lot, but at the same time, I would say it's an indicative of someone who is a lot more well-rounded, a lot more objective, because they can see both sides to a coin and they can put themselves in other people's shoes very easily. So this is usually a sign of a very empathetic person, whereas if you have a conjunction between your sun and your moon, it can be harder for you to empathize with others. I'm not saying that you're not empathetic, because you might obviously have, like, let's say a lot of planets in water signs, so you're able to pick up emotions anyway. But still, the focus with the opposition between the sun and the moon tends to be on the other, not on you, on the outside world, and on validation from the outside world. Now, in terms of how this was perceived, or how this aspect, the opposition, played out in a person's childhood, it's very possible that there was a stark contrast between the mother and the father figure. So for instance, one of them might have been like a full-blown extrovert, and the other one might have been like an introvert to the core. It is also possible that the child might have gotten the message that the parents are somehow at war in childhood, and the child might have felt as if they were somewhere in the middle and trying to mitigate things and trying to resolve the conflict. And it is very possible for people who have this sort of configuration in their chart that they actually go into some sort of conflict solving position or job or career further down the line in life, where they have to mitigate opposing parties and find common ground and build bridges. Now, if you've got a square between the sun and the moon in your chart, you can be very acutely aware of what your ego wants, but at the same time also very acutely aware of what it is that you would need in order to feel satisfied, in order to feel tranquility into your life. And there is usually a great dissatisfaction, a much greater dissatisfaction with the square than with the opposition or with any other configuration. There's usually a dissatisfaction with the status quo. So you feel a compulsion to get you usually feel a compulsion to get out of where you are right now, to change who you are, to evolve who you are, to leave behind a part of your identity. And that can become a lifelong endeavor. You can also be very quick, if you have this configuration in your chart, to pick up cues from the external environment, and especially from your parents, that tell you that you have to change. Even though your parents might not be giving you more cues than any other parent gives to their kids in childhood, you might pick early on the message that maybe there's something wrong with you. I'm not saying there is, but that's probably something that you might have picked up. There could have also been quite a lot of arguments in the household growing up, and a lot of dissent between the mother and the father figure. And for the individual with this configuration, it's possible that they take this sort of argumentative household kind of pattern and manifest it in their own relationships further down the line. I mean, that's something that we usually tend to do anyway. We tend to take whatever patterns were played out into our mother and father's relationship and apply them subconsciously in our own life. Last but not least, let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about the challenging aspects, let's talk a little bit about the flowing aspects, the harmonious aspects, the trine and the sextile, which usually manifest quite similarly in a mundane kind of environment. So the individual feels them quite similarly, both the trine and the sextile between the sun and the moon. There can be a sense of satisfaction with oneself. The individual is content with who they are. There is like a great alignment, and I'd say almost like a feeling of contentedness with what a person wants and what they need. So these people are usually really good with themselves. So they're at peace with themselves. They're fine with themselves. They don't want to change who they are. Some might consider that complacency, and yes, to some people it might manifest as complacency. It might even manifest as laziness, because they don't feel this need to better themselves, to change themselves. I'm not saying that they won't better themselves. I'm saying that there's like less of a pressure internally to improve who a person is. In a day-to-day life in their childhood, this might have manifested as a very happy environment to grow up in, a very harmonious environment to grow up in. There was a lot of understanding between the parents. Ultimately, whoever has this configuration in their chart, so either a trine or a sextile between the sun and the moon, tends to be more resilient, I would say, to the stress of life, because they don't have to they don't feel compelled to always question themselves and always doubt themselves and always think there's something wrong with them, or maybe they have to change who they are, and they can plod along through the challenges of life, I would say, a little bit more easily and a little bit with a little bit of less pressure. So they're okay with themselves, I've got to say. So if you have any other questions about the sun and the moon in your chart, please let me know. Obviously, it depends, and there's going to be an added layer of how this manifests, of how these aspects manifest, based on the signs that they are in your own chart, and based on the houses that they are in your own chart. So if you want to dig deeper into your natal chart, again, please feel free to contact me, because that's something that I can do for you. I offer natal chart readings. And I'm hoping this has been interesting and insightful, and you've taken a lot out of it. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and I shall speak to you soon. Bye!